The night of the championship game arrived, cloaked in an unsettling fog that blanketed the city of Arlington. It was the kind of night that felt charged with an energy that could shatter glass. The Dallas Cowboys and the Pittsburgh Steelers were set to clash in a much-anticipated showdown at AT&T Stadium. But there was something otherworldly in the air, a feeling that hinted at dark forces lurking just beneath the surface. As fans streamed into the stadium, excitement buzzed, but for a few, a shadow of dread fell over them. Jace, a die-hard Cowboys fan, tightened his grip on his jersey as he approached the entrance. His friends Mark and Lydia were with him, but Jace felt a gnawing sensation in his gut. He had been following the Cowboys for years, his allegiance unwavering, but tonight felt different. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation, yet there was an undercurrent of unease that he couldn't shake off. Inside the stadium, the roar of the crowd was deafening. It was a sea of blue and silver on one side, and black and gold on the other. As the teams warmed up, the energy reached a fever pitch, but Jace noticed something odd. The Steelers fans, with their traditional rallying cries, seemed almost too fervent, their chants echoing with a hollow resonance. It was as if they were tapping into a power far beyond mere team spirit. As the kickoff approached, Jace and his friends settled into their seats. The lights dimmed, and the crowd hushed. In that silence, Jace thought he heard whispers, faint but clear, creeping into his mind like a chilling breeze. "We'll take what is ours." He shuddered, brushing it off as a figment of his imagination. But Lydia's hand tightened on his arm. She had heard it too. "Did you feel that?" she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Jace nodded, the feeling of dread deepening. The game commenced, and for a while the excitement overshadowed the earlier feelings of unease. The Cowboys fought hard, their offense pushing through the Steelers' defense like a relentless tide. Touchdowns were met with cheers, and the scoreboard flickered with each new point. But every time the Cowboys scored, the Pittsburgh fans grew eerily quiet, their eyes dark and focused, as if they were waiting for something more. As the first half drew to a close, a thick fog rolled in from the north, creeping slowly toward the stadium. The atmosphere shifted, and the cheers turned into uneasy murmurs. The fog wrapped itself around the stadium, muffling the sounds, making it difficult to hear the announcers. Jace felt the chill seep into his bones. After halftime, as the players returned to the field, Jace noticed the Steelers fans were now more animated than ever. They waved terrible towels with an unsettling fervor, their chants morphing into something sinister. It was as if they were summoning an ancient power, one that Jace couldn't quite comprehend. "Something's not right," he muttered to Mark, who nodded, his brow furrowed. The fog thickened and the lights flickered momentarily, causing the crowd to gasp. Jace's heart raced as he realized the game was slipping away from them. The Cowboys, once confident and in control, were now on the defensive. With each passing minute, the energy shifted. The Cowboys struggled against the relentless advance of the Steelers, who seemed imbued with a ferocity that transcended the game. As the fourth quarter approached, Jace felt an inexplicable urge to leave. Something primal warned him that staying would lead to consequences he could not fathom. "I need to go," he said, rising from his seat. "I can't stay here." "Where are you going?" Lydia asked, concern etched on her face. "I don't know, but I can't be here. Something's off." He turned, pushing his way through the crowd, the chants fading into a distant echo as he navigated the foggy paths of the stadium. As Jace made his way through the concourse, he could hear the roars of the crowd fading, replaced by something darker. Shadows danced in the fog, figures flickering in and out of view. He stumbled upon a darkened hallway, the kind that led to the depths of the stadium. Curiosity mingled with fear, pulling him toward the unknown. In that dimly lit corridor, he found a door slightly ajar, and as he peered inside, his heart sank. The room was filled with memorabilia, jerseys, helmets, and trophies, but it was the eerie altar at the center that caught his attention. A table covered in black cloth held the remnants of what appeared to be a ritual. Bones and red stones littered the surface, and a strange energy pulsed in the air. "What is this?" he whispered, horrified. "Something that should never have been disturbed," came a voice from behind him. Jace spun around, heart racing, to find a figure cloaked in darkness. The face was obscured, but the voice was smooth and serpentine. "You've seen too much, young man, but you're not alone. This night belongs to the Steelers." Panic surged within Jace, and he turned to flee, but the door slammed shut behind him. The figure stepped closer, and in the flickering light, Jace caught a glimpse of the person's eyes. Dead, soulless orbs that seemed to draw in the darkness around them. "The Steelers are not just a team, they are a force," the figure continued, moving with an unnatural grace. "They've made a pact, and tonight they will claim their victory, but it will come at a cost." "What do you mean?" Jace gasped, feeling the walls of the room close in around him. "They take what they need to ensure their power, and you, my friend, are part of the sacrifice," the figure hissed. With a surge of adrenaline, Jace lunged for the door, pounding against it with all his might. It wouldn't budge. The figure watched with a chilling smile, relishing the fear that radiated from him. In that moment of desperation, Jace recalled the fire axe he'd seen earlier in the hallway. He had to get out and warn his friends. Using all his strength, he threw himself against the door one last time, and it finally creaked open. He burst into the corridor, sprinting toward the exit. But the atmosphere had shifted drastically. The once vibrant sounds of the game had transformed into a cacophony of anguished screams. Jace dashed back toward the stands, desperate to find Lydia and Mark. But the fog was thicker now, swirling around him like a living entity. Shadows flickered at the edges of his vision, and the echoes of the Steelers' chants morphed into something terrifying, an incantation that reverberated in his mind. He finally spotted his friends near the entrance, their faces pale and panicked. "We have to go, now!" he shouted, dragging them away from the stands as the lights flickered ominously. "What happened?" Mark demanded, his voice shaky. "It's the Steelers. Something's wrong," Jace gasped, trying to keep his breathing steady. Suddenly, the fog thickened, and a figure emerged from the swirling mist. It was the cloaked figure from before, eyes gleaming with an unholy light. "You cannot escape what has been set in motion," it hissed. Lydia screamed, and Jace pushed them forward, shoving through the crowd as panic erupted around them. People were fleeing in all directions, but the Steelers fans remained eerily still, their eyes locked on the field, chanting their dark mantra. As Jace and his friends made their way toward the exit, they saw the field illuminated by a ghostly glow. The players were locked in a surreal struggle, their forms shifting, blending with the shadows. It was no longer just a game, it was a battle for souls. Just as they reached the doors, a powerful force pulled them back. The cloaked figure stood between them and freedom. "You will pay the price for the Cowboys' failure," it intoned, and the air crackled with energy. In that moment of sheer desperation, Jace remembered the fire axe and turned to face the figure, eyes blazing with determination. "Not if I can help it!" he shouted, grabbing a nearby metal railing and swinging it like a weapon. The figure recoiled, and the moment of distraction allowed them to slip past. They burst through the doors into the cool night air, gasping for breath as they stumbled onto the parking lot. The sounds of the game faded behind them, replaced by the deafening silence of the night. "Did we make it?" Lydia panted, looking back at the stadium, where flickers of light danced through the fog. "We can't look back," Jace urged, urging them toward his car. "We need to get out of here. Whatever is happening, it's not over." They drove away, adrenaline pumping through their veins as they left the stadium behind. The fog followed, clinging to the edges of the road, but as they reached the city limits, it finally dissipated. The sense of unease lingered, but they had escaped the immediate danger. Days passed, and while life returned to some semblance of normal, the memory of that night haunted them. Jace found himself constantly checking the news, hoping for any updates on the game and the players involved, but nothing emerged, just vague reports of strange occurrences in the area surrounding the stadium. Then one evening, as Jace sat on his couch, a news alert flashed across the screen. A special report on the championship game, the one that had transformed into a nightmare. The reporter spoke of the fans who had disappeared, the players who hadn't returned home, and the eerie presence that lingered in the fog. Jace felt a chill race down his spine. "It can't be over," he whispered, fear creeping back into his heart. The next day, he decided to visit the stadium, compelled by an urge he couldn't ignore. As he approached the entrance, the fog rolled in, thick and ominous. The memories of that night flooded back, but this time, he was determined to confront whatever lay ahead. Inside, the atmosphere was charged. The stands were empty, but the air crackled with energy. He walked down the corridor, retracing his steps, and found himself drawn to the dark room again. The altar still stood, untouched, as if waiting for him. As he approached, he felt the presence again, the cloaked figure emerging from the shadows. "You cannot escape what has been summoned," it whispered, a sinister grin spreading across its face. "Why?" Jace demanded, feeling a surge of courage. "Why did you do this?" The figure's eyes glinted with malice. "Power is a price to be paid, and the stealers will rise again. They will take what they desire, and you, child, are part of the bargain." In that moment, Jace understood the truth. The game had become more than just a battle between teams. It was a conflict of dark forces vying for dominance. The Cowboys had become the sacrificial lambs, the stealers the harbingers of something wicked. "No more!" Jace shouted, feeling the weight of his friend's absence, their sacrifices haunting him. "You won't take anyone else!" With a surge of adrenaline, he lunged for the altar, grabbing a piece of the red stone and holding it aloft. "This ends here," he cried, channeling every ounce of his fear and anger into a single thought. The figure recoiled, the shadows around it writhing as if in pain. "You cannot break the cycle!" But Jace pushed forward, determined to shatter the dark grip the figure held. The stone pulsed in his hand, light spilling forth and enveloping him, driving back the darkness. With one final cry, Jace hurled the stone at the figure, and a blinding light erupted in the room. The cloaked figure howled, its form disintegrating into a whirlwind of shadows. The energy crackled, the air thick with tension, and for a moment, Jace felt himself suspended in time. Then silence. The room was still, the altar dissolved into dust. Jace stood alone, panting, the weight of what had transpired settling heavily on his shoulders. As he stumbled out of the stadium, the fog lifted, revealing a clear night sky. The stars shone brightly above, and the world felt strangely lighter. But Jace knew that the scars of that night would linger. In the following weeks, the stories of the championship game faded from headlines, replaced by the usual banter of football seasons. The Cowboys and Steelers continued their legacies, but Jace and his friends carried the weight of the knowledge they had gained. Though they had escaped, the darkness had not vanished entirely. Jace often found himself glancing at the news, waiting for the day the fog would return, knowing that some battles were never truly over. Years later, as he sat in his living room, the TV flickered to life, announcing the annual championship game between the Cowboys and Steelers. A familiar chill crept down his spine, but this time, he was ready. The world may forget, but he wouldn't. Not after what he had witnessed. Tonight, he would watch, and he would remember. For in the shadows of sport, darkness lurked, waiting for its moment to strike once more.